Few people now remember what the word woke meant before it became an insult. These days it is used by those of us who believe in reality to mock the lunatic fringe of the left, but it was not always thus. While the word has come to mean an ideology obsessed with victimhood, identity and the falsification of history to suit today's political agenda, those who once proudly called themselves woke intended something else. It was, at that time, a self-congratulatory label, which meant, first and foremost, being aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially in relation to racial and social justice. As has been discussed ad nauseum, in practice what this awareness of facts pertaining to various forms of justice meant was a framework in which certain groups were victims and other groups were victimizers. Some groups were suffering, and their suffering was the responsibility of other groups which had conspired to mistreat and take advantage of them. But a conspiratorial worldview of this nature cannot be maintained on faith alone. Explanations had to be given for why this false narrative was in fact not false at all. First, and highly relevant to our imminent discussion of the woke right, the woke left never claimed that the arguments they were making were true. Instead, rather than attempting to prove the impossible, they wisely made an entirely different claim. Truth, they argued, is merely a linguistic projection of power. The powerful brainwash the rest of us into seeing the things they want us to believe as the truth. To claim that something is true is to abuse the power you have over others. It is an act of linguistic violence.
So today we're looking at the Triggernometry Podcast, and this is the co-host of the Triggernometry Podcast. His name is Konstantin, and he's talking about wokeness, and specifically what he is going to describe is something that he calls the woke right. As he just said in his introduction, of course, in the current time as I record this, woke is being used typically by people on the right, so to speak, to describe unhinged, unreal beliefs by those on the left. Specifically when it comes to social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, climate justice, all of these social justice agendas. And yes, that is how it's being used. And it looks like he's going to start, judging by his introduction, it sounds like he's going to start saying that the right has also become woke in its own way. So let's hear what he has to say. This should be interesting.
This is why if you were to assert that you know how many genders there are, or quote facts about contentious social issues, such as police violence against minorities, that would be used as evidence of your poor character and nefarious intent. All it showed was your bias, fragility, and so on. If this sounds a little abstract, a more concrete and even more relevant example is what the wokesters did to history. They attempted to destroy, both physically and reputationally, anything about the past that served as a reminder of the achievements of our society.
Very Orwellian. Yes, that is exactly what the wokesters have done and are continuing to do as we speak. Statues, we have to take them down. Statue of George Washington, or of Thomas Jefferson, or of the president of Cambridge University, or whoever it was, because apparently they had slaves at some point. They owned slaves. So what? Yeah, people throughout all of human history and prehistory have owned slaves. So that is pure wokeness, and he's right to point it out.
Statues were torn down and defaced. Historical figures on whom we'd looked with pride or to whom we looked for inspiration were attacked. Why? Because history, and the truth more broadly, is to humans what roots are to trees. It is a way of knowing which way is up and which way is down. Strip a people of their history, destroy the concept of truth itself, and they're left unmoored, floating in limbo, pushed and pulled in random directions by every new seductive force that comes along. As Hannah Arendt powerfully explained, the constant lying is not aimed at making the people believe a lie, but at ensuring that no one believes anything anymore. The people who can no longer distinguish between the truth and lies cannot distinguish between right and wrong. And such a people, deprived of the power to think and judge, is, without knowing and willing it, completely subjected to the rule of lies. With such a people, you can do whatever you want. The woke logic operates like this. There are good and bad identity groups. You can't trust anything you've been taught about history or anything you're being told today because your beliefs are based on lies spread by people who are in control of society. There is another select group of people, us, who understand what's really going on and we're bravely raising awareness of the issue. Anyone who disagrees with us or criticizes us is doing so because they're a bad person, and their criticism and disagreement just proves that we are right and they're bad. The woke revolution which occurred over the last 10 years was bad enough, but the iron law of reality is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Having lived through a decade of this race Marxism which spread through our elite institutions like an aggressive cancer, I believe we're now witnessing the emergence of an equivalent phenomenon on the fringes of the right. Tucker Carlson has just hosted a man called Daryl Cooper on his show, describing him as maybe the best and most honest popular historian in the United States.
Remember that term, popular historian. No, he's not an academic historian. Now, I have not watched this. I have heard about this Tucker Carlson interview with Daryl Cooper, and it has caused a firestorm on the internet. I have not listened to it yet, so I can't comment on it specifically. But as I recall, one of the main contentions or the wokesters are criticizing him for what they claim he said. And they claim he said that Churchill was bad and Hitler was good. Of course, that is not what he said, but he did have, as far as I understand, a great deal of criticism of Winston Churchill. As far as I know, he never said Hitler was good or the Nazis were good. But I will watch it, and I will certainly comment on that interview in due course.
Cooper, who goes by the online moniker Martyr Maid, is indeed incredibly honest. In addition to thinking that Adolf Hitler, a genocidal mass murderer, strolling through the Paris he had just conquered is highly preferable to drag queens, Cooper also explained that Churchill was the chief villain of World War II.
Yeah, clearly Cooper knows how to get himself noticed online.
The thread he posted on X following his interview with Carlson is so historically illiterate that every major claim he made was debunked on X itself within hours with community notes and in articles published by prominent historians such as Victor Davis Hansel, Neil Ferguson and others. But this video is not about Cooper. I do not find him remotely interesting. There are and have always been lying charlatans and overconfident fools. What is interesting is the warm welcome he received on Tucker Carlson's show and what that represents. The woke right, for which Carlson is the undisputed spiritual leader, is feeling its way to a logic of its own. It is far from being fully formed, but it goes something like this. You can't believe anything you're being told. Look how they lied to you about Trump. True. COVID. True. And Biden winning the 2020 election. False. What if they also lied to you about everything else? We don't claim to know the truth. We're just asking questions. Or we know what the truth is not, whatever the elites are telling you. Look how triggered they are by us just asking questions. That's evidence of their bias and fragility. It proves we are right. This is where historical revisionism comes in.
I wouldn't say... I understand some of his points here, but I disagree with some of his assertions. Yes, we are told a lot of lies. There is no doubt about that. And yes, you should be able to question literally anything. Now, that doesn't mean that everything we have been told is a lie, and that everything, therefore, that what he calls the woke right, tells us is therefore true. He seems to be making a similar logical error here. Let's keep listening and see what he says.
Just like the woke left, the woke right has come to hate the West for the reasons I detailed in my previous video. But what is more...
Excuse me? The woke right has come to hate the West? No. The woke... I don't think so. We'll have to see his previous video, and I'll do that in a separate commentary. No. Surely not. The woke right does not hate the West. I assume he means something like the woke right is cozying up to Vladimir Putin, who currently, in current day, is suddenly become the West's #1 enemy for some reason, according to all the warmongers in the United States, the neocons and the liberals and the Democrats and all that, who are now massive. Apparently, they're all in favor of war, and they're all in favor of enemies, such as Russia and China and North Korea and Iran. But woke right is anti-West? I don't think so.
The what else are they lying about question is a slippery slope down which you inexorably slide if it becomes the lens through which you see the world. Just as a woke leftist sees a conspiracy against him that he calls systemic racism in every workplace, classroom, and interaction, so a woke rightist sees a conspiracy against him in every institution, media publication, and historical consensus. Importantly, disagreement and criticism only reinforces his belief in the conspiracy. Note how this is an exact mirror image of the woke left's approach to debate. Put forward false assertions, make no attempt to back them up when challenged, and use the criticism you receive as evidence of both your rightness and your righteousness.
The Tucker Carlson interview with Daryl Cooper was not a debate, and most debates these days, in fact, are not debates at all. Just look at the recent presidential debate between Kamala Harris and President Trump. It's not a debate. No presidential debates are debates in the true sense of the word. They're just people getting their talking points out, and they have 2 minutes to speak. They say their thing, and then the other person says their thing. They're not debates at all.
The one element that is still missing, which is why the ideology has yet to properly take shape, is that the scapegoat group behind the conspiracy is still unclear. To the woke left, straight white men are the obvious source of the world's evils, but the woke right has struggled to find an equally plausible culprit. They've experimented with globalists, Marxists, and elites, but none of them fit the bill because they do not readily conjure an image of the suspect group in the mind of the average viewer. If you asked 10 woke rightists to draw a picture of a globalist, a Marxist, or a member of the conspiratorial elite, they'd likely struggle. And because elites is what they've gone with for the moment, the logic doesn't really work. When most people on the woke right think of the elites, they imagine a cabal of senior Democrats, billionaire funders, and the leaders of other major institutions. And the problem with that is that it's extremely difficult to believe that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are orchestrating a conspiracy, given that they appear unable to get through a press conference.
Yeah, this guy is not getting it at all. Nobody thinks that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are organizing a conspiracy. The people that control them are the problem. And even calling it a conspiracy, of course, plays into the woke left's hands, because they just say, oh, you think there's a conspiracy. All these conspirators get together a couple times a year behind closed doors and decide how they're going to run the world. Yeah, and of course, just the use of the word conspiracy makes it sound like, oh, you're a nutcase. Wow, you're seeing conspirators behind every shadow. No, but it's clear that the puppets in government are not running things. That's obvious.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky.
Oh, that was classic. Joe Biden, you gotta love him. Love him or hate him, you gotta love him when he does this kind of thing. I believe that was at NATO a few months ago. Not far from where I live.
I'm going to come to the overflow room.
Oh, if this is going to be Constantine's argument for how these ridiculous, how Joe Biden obviously can't be organizing a conspiracy, yeah, we know that.
This is where the war in Israel has come in handy. For people like Candace Owens, another darling of the woke right, whose ignorance and conspiratorial delusions are matched only by her charisma and bombastic arrogance, it has provided the opportunity to hone in on something a little more tangible. She currently spends most of her time debating weird rabbis and ranting online about Frankists. I don't claim to know what she means exactly, but for some reason her audience pepper her tweets with replies encouraging her to just say Jews. Whether the rest of the woke...
Yeah, well, I saw some clips of her talking or yelling or debating, so-called, again, a non-debate. I believe that was on Piers Morgan with Rabbi Shmuley, who, if I wouldn't want him representing me, I'll put it that way. That guy is out there.
right moves in this direction remains to be seen. For now, on the mainstream right, the taboo against associating with illiterate Nazi apologists of the type that Carlson's just hosted has held up remarkably well.
Ah, see, there we go. This guy, Constantine, he's making this whole video where he's trying to appear rational and calm and collected, pointing out the foibles of the extreme left and the extreme right. And he's just called now Tucker Carlson's guest, Daryl Cooper, that popular historian, not an academic historian, whom he just mentioned a few minutes ago, who he just said is a nobody and doesn't know what he's talking about, plenty of errors. Now he's just called him a Nazi apologist. So it makes me wonder, Constantine, what's your agenda?
Well, we'll see if that remains the case over the months to come. For an actual history of Churchill, by the way, I recommend our discussion with historian Andrew Roberts or the conversation he had with Douglas Murray here on YouTube.
He was involved in 3 car crashes, 2 plane crashes. He went into no man's land in the First World War some 30 times. He got so close to the German trenches he could actually hear them speaking in their trenches. He once said that there's nothing so exhilarating in life as to be shot at without result.
Yeah, I'm sure Churchill had a very interesting history, a very interesting life. Absolutely. That's irrelevant. Maybe he was super brave during the First World War, which was a complete and utter nightmare from all accounts. You know, trench warfare, no man's land between the trenches, officers telling the soldiers to go over the top and run straight into machine gun fire. Oh, and by the way, don't forget your gas mask, because mustard gas clouds are going to be going to be floating across no man's land. And if you breathe that mustard gas, it's going to turn your lungs to jelly. Yeah, an absolute horror show. And if Churchill lived through that, and I mean, I'm sure he was a tough old bastard. Absolutely. I respect him for that. You know who else was tough in World War I? A certain Austrian painter whose name shall not be mentioned. Now, probably not as tough as Churchill, as far as I know. That certain Austrian painter didn't crawl across no man's land. But that's not what we're here to discuss anyway. The fact is, yes, Churchill had a colorful history, had a colorful life. Tough old bastard, soldier, head of the Admiralty, of the Royal Navy in Britain. Yeah, nobody's denying that. That's not what we're talking about. And that's not what the popular historian Daryl Cooper was talking about. He was talking about his actions in the run-up to the Second World War and during the war, and how he has been painted as a saint of sorts in the post-war period, and that maybe, just maybe, we should take another look at that and look at his actions in the harsh light of day, from a remove of several decades, and just see what the reality is. Now, I have no idea. I'm no historian. I'm no academic. Maybe everything he said was wrong. But it can't hurt to ask questions. It simply can't. Okay, I think that's enough for Constantine today. But again, he may be making good points as far as it goes. But clearly, already in this short video, he has shown what I consider biases, which we all have, no problem with biases, but he's shown some clear agenda, and he's shown some clear animus against what he calls the woke right, and has provided very little evidence of it. He said that this this popular historian interviewed by Tucker was completely wrong. Okay, if he's wrong, we can all go on his Twitter and see all the community notes which disavow him, or which debunk his erroneous claims. I will do it myself. I'm interested. But I don't see anything wrong at all in taking a look at history, because as they say, history is written by the victors. And it's been many decades since the end of the Second World War, and I think it's a good thing to take a look at the history written by the victors. Reminds me of that famous meme by comedian Norm Macdonald. You can look it up, but it's just Norm got that face, and he says, "Yeah, it's amazing. It says here in this book that the good guys have won every war. Who would have thunk it?" Or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But that's the truth. It's amazing. The history books point out that the good guys won every war. So I'll leave you with that for now. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, helps me to continue making this content. And I plan to make a lot more because we have a lot of work to do.